always fun to go around and meet new people. I'm happy to be here. Just a disclaimer, I tend to speak pretty fast, so if I get too excited and I speak too fast, you just yell at me and say talk slower, and I'll try that. But just my name is Philip. You can find me on Twitter. That's my handle there, and I'll have that again in a later slide. I come from a country called Denmark. As Peter just said, I'm here because we're here for a company trip, and I thought it would be fun to just go a day early. So the rest of my company is coming tomorrow. So I just thought it would be fun to go a day early and get to meet you guys. And I always like to talk about web and Angular stuff. Yeah, so my company is called Impact. We are a consultancy. We do e-commerce for bigger clients in Denmark. But I'm not really here to talk about that today, but feel free to ask me about that if you want to. I do run a local Angular group in the city of Aarhus where I live. So if you're ever in Denmark and you want to give a presentation, or if you want to learn something, you should look us up and again, find me on Twitter and hit me up if you're anywhere close. Obviously pretty proud of that, but it's pretty cool. I get to travel around, and when I do stuff like this, Google pays my flights and hotels and stuff, so I get to travel around and talk about stuff that I'm passionate about. So that's pretty cool, and I get a chance to sit down to the people who does the Chrome browser, who does Angular, Polymer, some of the Google products, and I actually talk to them every month and hear about what are their plans and give them some feedback and stuff. So that's a lot of fun. So if you have problems with Google stuff, come talk to me, and I'll give you some people you can talk to. But that's it for the plug about myself. So let's talk about Angular and the CMS and how we can do dynamic stuff in a very static way, the way that Angular kind of likes the world to be. So yeah, as I said, the talk is called Angular plus CMS. And so at our agency, we build for clients, we build e-commerce stuff, and they always have some kind of to be able to edit content and add products and add new pages with content in it. And Angular is not really built for that. So it worked pretty well with AngularJS, and we've been using that for years and years. And then when the new Angular 2, whatever you want to call it, just Angular, came out, obviously we wanted to see if we could make it work in our context, where everything changes so the editor can actually be changing things while there's a user on the site, and we need to be able to work in that area. So the first thing I thought was, so in AngularJS, I would just, let the CMS handle the HTML output, like any CMS can do, and they're traditionally built to do. And I would just bootstrap Angular on the document element or the body element, and Angular would take over, and everything would be magic, and it would be so easy to get started. But if you've been paying attention to the new Angular, you can't do that. You can't just bootstrap anywhere. We actually need to bootstrap a component. So we can't just bootstrap any DOM element. We need to bootstrap a component. So our app starting point kind of needs to be a specific component that we built. So in Angular, it looks like this. So I'll try to be consistent and say AngularJS when I mean the version 1 dot something, and just Angular for everything that's above version 2. I'll try to be consistent in that. So in Angular, this is how you bootstrap a component. So you more or less make an ng module and say, so we want at startup, we want to bootstrap the app component. And that way, that's how Angular gets started. But the problem in our world is we don't really have a one point of entry for our application. So maybe we have a gallery somewhere and a basket somewhere else. They need to be in the same page, but sometimes the gallery is at the top and sometimes it's at the bottom, and there's text around it and stuff. And that doesn't really work with the template that needs to go with the component that we bootstrap. So I thought to myself, we can do multiple entry points. We'll have the CMS actually know what parts is an Angular app. So the gallery is an Angular app, and then the CMS can bootstrap that, or the Angular can bootstrap the parts that the CMS tells it is on this page. And it's possible to do this. You can actually share state between multiple apps on the same page, multiple Angular apps on the same page. It is a little bit harder. It's doable. So we could just bootstrap multiple components. So the problem is that the CMS needs to know and tell Angular on every page. So on this page, these are the components that are in this page. So we can't just put all available components in here, because that way Angular will die, because they're not all on the same page. And we might even have two galleries on the same page. And then we have to also know which DOM element is which, so we can bootstrap a specific component with a specific DOM element. So it gets pretty hard, and it gets really messy. And so I kind of don't like that idea. So we need to pass data into these components. Maybe they need to get some initial data. They have some content that's actually coming from the CMS. So in AngularJS, we would make maybe make what in Angular we call an input. We would make an input and put data in as JSON and something, so we can have initial data that's coming from the CMS. And we would maybe put the actual tag inside. In AngularJS, it's called transclusion, so you can actually have content that's coming, put it inside the tag, and then you can reference that from the template. So that's what I thought. We can do this. But then again, it turns out whenever there's a root component, it cannot have inputs, and it cannot use transclusion. So most of my ideas of how to get this to actually work, they died in just failing before they even took off. So then I started thinking, came into a pretty hacky mode one day, and I thought maybe we can build a body component. So how about we do a body component, and then we say the template is just the content of the body. So it turns out this can actually work. It feels terrible. It's really, really slow, but this can actually work. You shouldn't do this. Just don't do this. But you can do it if you really, really had to. The problem is, other than it's ugly, since the template is passed at runtime, we can't do any of the ahead of time compilations that really makes Angular fast. And we need to ship the entire parser down as well, so Angular is going to be huge. It's going to be really slow to start, and it's going to be a really big JavaScript file that needs to be downloaded for the page to actually work. So, I don't want to do this. I want to give the user a good experience. I want to build stuff that I'm proud of and that doesn't make me go ew when I see it. So I came to my senses and I said, so we need a spa. So we need a single page app, so we can actually share state between one page to the other, because it's not a complete reload. We'll actually just go like Angular was built to work, so we can actually animate when you go from one page to another, even though the CMS controls whatever pages is available. So I thought I would start out by showing a demo, so this demo is just a screen recording I did of a very simple proof of concept. So don't bother with the design; it's really ugly. But I hope you can kind of get the idea that here's a page. You can click around. There's different page types. So there's a regular text page. There's pages with 2 columns on them. There's even a product page. You can navigate around and you can do stuff. So let's see if the video works here. So don't mind that it's in Danish, but you kind of get the idea. You can click around. There are different page types. There's even products being loaded asynchronously behind the scenes, And this is kind of what we wanted to have, and what we want Angular to give us. So it all starts with the router. So in Angular or any other framework, we have a router, and we say, so whenever there's a path that's slash or something, take me to the front page. Whenever there's slash products, take me to a product page. Whenever there's the list goes on and on and on and on. The problem is it's not very dynamic. So what happens when stuff changes? We have too many routes and there's no clear pattern. So the slash route is the front page. Maybe this is an about us page, which is a content page. Then there's a product category page. But there's and this kind of looks like this, but this is a subcategory page. And it's just, and then there's one again that's just on the root, which is the product page. So there's no clear patterns in how to say which path should go to which component. So it's pretty hard. So I actually went and talked to the Angular team, and they were like, maybe you can let the CMS actually output a config for the router. So the CMS node knows that slash about us is a content page and slash something is a product page. The CMS knows all about that. So maybe that should just output a very giant file of configuration. And there's actually two issues I had with that approach. So we need to build and validate this every time every time a user or an editor changes something, or a product runs out of stock, or a URL is changed or something. We need to invalidate all of this file, and maybe either we should ship it as a separate file, and we could possibly reload it lazily and skip all the old configuration, but that would be kind of hard, and it would be hard to know when to do that. So, because that's the other part of this problem is that the user kind of gets stuck on whatever configuration was the truth whenever they visited the website for the first time. So whenever they click around, they'll see all the routes that were available at that time when they ever loaded the page the first time. So it didn't really feel that good. Like it would be possible, and you could do workarounds it, but yeah, I kind of didn't like that either. So I went back to my hacky mode, and I thought we can do one route to rule them all. So we'll have just one route that matches any route path. So whatever the path is, this is the route that we'll actually go to. And then we can, have the CMS, instead of output HTML, actually have it output something that would be, the data model of the page. So, and here you can see, this is just an example that actually rendered the proof of concept that I built, where it says, so this is the template for this page, it's the front page, it should have this title and the URL bar, there's some data here, there's a header, which is a heading, there's some content which is built into blocks of spots, and then there's a hero image, which is something that's just on a front page. So this was a sub page. Maybe some other content would be available, maybe some other specific points would be for that page type. So the solution here is really to make a star route or a star route that matches any pattern, and then make a very generic page component that knows how to ask the server, so this is the URL, what kind of page should this be, and then actually render that out. So we could get the data in a resolve. So for the router, we can do a resolve and say, when this route is resolving, we'll actually do something synchronously, and when we have the response back, we'll load the page. So this way, we can actually get the data while the user is going from one page to the other, and see what should be rendered for this page. So this way, even if the editor has changed something behind the scenes while the user is in here, the next time he clicks a button, he'll be taken to the currently current version of the page. So a resolver in Angular, we can look more at the code into the code if you want to later. We'll do it in questions or something. But resolver is just a class that has a resolve method on it, and this is just some boilerplate that sanitizes some stuff. But it ends up just going to an HTTP request that actually asks the server, so take me to web API/content, and actually encode the URL. So the server will just see what's on /about us, and can respond to that. And yeah, so that's kind of how the resolver works. So back in AngularJS, or Angular 1, as the slide says, I need to update, please. Sorry. We could then, use a template factory, get the data from the template and actually put it in there, and it would work. But we can't do that in Angular because there's no template parser at runtime. So the process, everything needs to be statically, available at build time. So we can actually have a really fast bundle that's really small and efficient. So I thought to myself, so how do we then say whenever it's front page use this stuff? So I thought to myself, we can make all the possible page components in the page component template and just do ngIfs on them all. So we could do this and say, so whenever it's when the template is front page, use the front page component, and so on and so forth. And then I have to put this slide back in because that just feels terrible, and that stuff shouldn't live in a template. Like I know when this goes through the compiler, with the head of time and stuff, like it actually gets compiled into code that runs, and it's not a template anymore. But it just still feels so wrong, and it shouldn't live in a template. But it kind of works until you actually click something. But the problem is when everything's the same route, it turns out you're not really changing the route. So the resolver doesn't work. Nothing just happens. So there's no new underneath. There's no new anything on the page component. It's just the same component. So I started refactoring, and I thought to myself, how do we do this? We can listen for route changes in the page component, like we normally do, like when you go from one product page to another or something, and then handle the resolve. Instead of it being a resolve, we could do it inside of the listener for route changes. So I went back and I wrote this little ng underneath that takes the observable that's from the activated route, and say, so whenever there's a new route, we'll send it to the page resolver, same thing as we did before. And whenever that data is ready, we'll put it on the page data, and we're back to it working. So I was kind of excited again. I got around yet another quirk, but the problem is that this problem kind of cascades down, because what then when you go from one product detail page to another product detail page? Because then the product detail page component isn't renewed because it's still the same ngIf doing its thing. So then there's no new underneath there, and there's no new resolve there, and it's just it just keeps cascading down the problem. So I thought we could refactor all of the init logic into unchanges in all of the subcomponents. So whenever the product detail page would load, instead of doing it in init, we can do it in unchanges because the data would change. But kind of didn't feel very well. So this was about a year ago, a little over a year ago, maybe a year and a half. So I was pretty early. And then one glorious day, the 4th release candidate came out. So RC4 came out, and it had a new feature that was the component factory resolver. And that was just adding everything I wanted to this. So I wanted to have something where I could programmatically say, make me a new instance of this component and put it in the template. And that's exactly what I got. So this is how it works, kind of in theory. So I would get a reference to the view container, get a reference to the component factory resolver, and then I would call component factory resolver dot resolve component factory. I love how they just mix the words around, and they're still really long. And make a new factory from that, and then make a new component based on the factory. And then at the very last, I would then take the data from the server and assign that to the data input on the component. So this actually works, and it's really, really awesome. So like in real life, in my down here in my subscribe callback, after doing the switch map, because the initial route's still not the same. So I could do all of this, find the components. So there's a little bit of magic here, because yeah, I'll show you that in the code later. But it needs to find out kind of what components are available and how to reference a certain component. Maybe I'll tell you. So the way I did it is, so I did the page components is really just an array of all the classes or all the components that you should be able to load this way, and they all have a static property on them with a string. That's the name of the template. So whenever the data says this is a template front page, there will be in the array, there'll be a front page component which will have a static ref called template, and that's kind of what we look up here. So we say if there's component.ref is the template name, we'll use that component. And then we resolve it, put the data on it. It's beautiful. Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying here. So there's a static ref on the front page component, and then there's just a list of all the components that you should be able to do this way. Because obviously you don't want to load a very atomic component as a page component. So just the components that are here, you can load this way. But kind of leads us back to one of the things we wanted to do was really animate between one page to another. And now that it's not really one route to another, it's just the same route being loaded with more data in the observable whenever the route changes. We can't do route change animations or anything with route changes. And it would kind of feel better too if we could do that. So I talked to some people try to talk to people everywhere I go, see what they have to offer me. And somebody told me, so did you look at, you can actually add a custom router reuse function or strategy. So the router takes when you instantiate the router, you can say, use this configuration for when to reuse a route. So I built my own custom router reuse strategy, which is just a class like everything else. And it has a couple of methods that Angular will call whenever you go from one route to the other. So this is just me saying, don't ever do anything, just always give me a new route. So whenever anything changes from route, it'll actually be a new route. We'll have routing animations available. We can refactor everything back into being a resolve instead of being inside of the uninit callback. So you add a class like this, you put it in you register it as a provider. Say, so whenever the router wants to use the router reuse strategy, go ahead and use my own custom router reuse strategy. So that's I felt clever again when I did this, and it was pretty cool. And then another problem came. So this presentation is just problems and me trying to solve them. I hope you like it, because that's all you're gonna get. So the next problem is, so how do we handle rich text? Because rich text is a very big thing in CMSs. So the editor wants to, they just want to have a field that kind of looks like Word or whatever, and type whatever in, paste stuff in, put a link in, or make text bold or bullet lists and all that kind of stuff. And how can we actually do this? So we use Sitecore. It looks like this. So you see, there's a lot of options here, and I think we've actually stripped some of them away because users tend to make bad words out of everything they get their hands on. So this is just a pretty simple one. You see, there's a link, there's some bold text and some formatted text and some headers and stuff, and we wanted that to actually be inside of our app. So the content would look like this. And I thought to myself, I know Angular. In AngularJS, there's this beautiful directive called ngbind.html. We could just put it on, and it would magically run. It's super cool. and it's a little bit simplistic, and but it works decently well. And in Angular, because in Angular you can bind directly to a property on an element, we can just bind directly to the inner HTML property of a DOM element and say, so just use the content but put it in as HTML, and that will actually render out stuff. And this is perfect, except for links, because in AngularJS, the router will hijack whenever there's a link on the page and you navigate to it. In Angular, so in New Angular, this is all done in the template, and as I said, the template is done at build time. So this content is not being passed by Angular in any way. So it's just a regular H tag with an href on it. So when you click it, the page will reload and you'll go to the new page. And that's kind of not what we wanted to do. So I was in a hacky mode again, and I thought, let's make an href direct. All hrefs. But then again, doesn't. Angular doesn't parse this. So it's just HTML being put in as HTML, and even if you have an href directive, well, because Angular doesn't know that this is actually being shown. So I was thinking again. This was a hard one. It took me quite a while to figure out how to do this, but I came up with the solution where on the page component, so on the component that actually puts this stuff in the DOM, that does the inner HTML binding, I make a host listener. So I make a listener on the element that listens for clicks and then intercepts them. So whenever there's a click, DOM events, they bubble up. So whenever you click something that's inside my inner HTML binding, it'll bubble up to that again. I will catch it from the host listener. I will cancel it so the browser won't do its own thing, and then I'll call router.java. So it kind of looks like this. So I make an intercept links directive that I put on the element, and I listen to the click event. I ask to actually also get the DOM event, so I can cancel it, and then I call router.navigate by URL. Boom, work. Now the user can insert a link into his rich text editor. He can click around. We can have all the stuff that we want to. So there's actually a little bit more going on here, because it is a little bit harder than this in real life. But this is the gist of it. So the problem is, what if you click something that's inside a link? So if you click a div that's inside of an href, then the target is going to be the div and not the a tag. So then the event target won't have an href property. So there's a little bit of DOM crawling and stuff going on in the real implementation. You can see it if you want to, but this is kind of how it works. And there's some stuff with when there's a link pointing to a different domain, we don't want to cancel it, and we don't want the router to take over. We want to actually go to the other URL. But this is more or less how it works. So we pretty much got all we wanted to, without all the ugly stuff. So it's pretty flexible. We actually have real routes. We get the data in the resolve. We can do nice animations. We have rich text coming from the user. We can do all of this. And just a side note, obviously for the blocks of content, that's the same thing going on. Where so the user can insert a gallery and a text and a gallery and a text and a text and a gallery. It'll come out as an array, and we'll do the same thing and say, so here are the content blocks or whatever, and the components that you can use as a content block. And the cool thing is, ahead of time with this approach, it just works. So it's if you haven't been playing around with it, with the CLI, you just build it put up an AOT flag on it. I don't even think you need the prod flag or the AOT flag. I think if you use the prod flag, I think the AOT is now enabled as default, but don't worry about that. We get all the nice tree shaking compatibilities, because obviously one thing I didn't really mention is whenever we declare our components, we need to also declare them as entry components, because entry components is how Angular knows that you're using this component somewhere that's not referenced in any other template. Because when Angular tries to be clever and build your app as small as possible, it actually looks through all your templates and see what other components you're using, and if you're not using any of the components, it'll just throw them away. And obviously, these components aren't referenced in any templates. So my front page component is not in any template. So if I don't put it in entry components, it would just be shaken away and it wouldn't work. So remember, so the page components array, I just added as declarations and as entry components, and we're good to go. You can actually have it built and do tree shaking on it. So with AOT, I actually got this just by adding the AOT flag when I built. I almost half built the pause time in the browser, so it's really fast to boot. And you know, just the bundle sizes. If you haven't seen these before, this is huge. Like the big thing you want to take a look at here is the big one. So the vendor bundle and the main bundle, which is Angular's code and my code, goes from 4 megabytes to, you know, a little over 4 megabytes combined into like 200 kilobytes. So I can actually build a very flexible dynamic Angular app and have it run in less than 200 kilobytes. It's really fast and it's really flexible. That's pretty cool. So the next thing is server-side rendering. Because I don't know about you guys, but we built, you know, e-commerce stuff. SEO is probably the most important thing in the world for most of our clients. We need it for SEO. We need it for, you know, social previews, because, you know, Google's kind of sometimes runs JavaScript in the crawler, sometimes, maybe, asterisk. But we know that Facebook and Twitter and all the stuff where you want to share this page to, they want a nice, you know, a nice preview, and they don't run JavaScript. And other search engines might not. And you know, you want to give the user a good experience. So we want to do this. And Angular Universal is also really hot. It's into core now. It's being run by the core team. It's actually growing. It's developing. It's maturing. But it is kind of hard to wrap your head around how it works. Took me a little bit of time to figure out. So I thought I would just share the idea with you. Just so if you don't know already, you can kind of get into the idea. So you know when you build an Angular app, you normally have an app module, which is just the container which bootstraps the initial element or component, and then you might have modules for features or however you want to structure your code. And you write the app completely the same way when you want to use server-side render. But then you actually, instead of starting from the app module, take it back one level, and then you build a server module that imports the app module and client-side module that imports the module. So yeah, so we built the server module and the client module. They both import our normal app module, and then the server and client module, they do the magic of replacing. So when you can't do, you know, AJAX requests from a server, you have to do some kind of node stuff instead. Or whenever you want to touch something on the DOM, there's no DOM on the server, we need to kind of handle that as well. And that they take care of all that for us. So it's actually like when you get into this mindset, it's actually pretty easy to get started with server-side rendering. And you just really have to pay attention that you cannot ever touch anything that's on the DOM directly. So don't ever touch the window object. Don't ever touch, you know, you do query selectors and stuff like we're used to in AngularJS and like we've been doing with jQuery for years. Like, you cannot do this anymore, because if you do, it will break on the server because there's no DOM. So obviously, sometimes you have to do that anyway. Like maybe you have to use a gallery that you know somebody else built and they touched the DOM. You can't go ahead and change that. You can't maybe throw it away and build your own. So sometimes you have to do it. So Angular gives you a hook where you can say, only run this if you're on the server, or only run this if you're in the browser. So you can actually do code where you can split the path and say, do this one place and do this the other place. or you can, you know that all the DOM events that you're listening for, so when you're listening for, so this only happens on click or something, you know these events won't be fired on the server, so you can safely do query selector stuff or whatever you want to do with DOM stuff inside of those. Yeah, let's just show you a little bit of code. So as you see, this is my browser app module. So this more or less just takes the browser module, which is something that comes from Universal. So the Angular teams build it for us, and then it ends up just including the app module, and that handles bootstrapping everything for you. Then there's a browser animation module, because if you want to use animations, you kind of want them to be run on the server or on the client. And then you see the server module is very similar, so I'll just change it really quickly. You see how it's almost the same. So the difference is here, instead of actually running the browser animation module, we run a different module. There's a couple of other modules you can run. There's a no-op animations module, which will actually still fire all the animation callbacks, but just don't animate anything and just do it at a timeout of 0. So just run immediately. So if you have something that's depending on an animation completing before it actually stuck on the page or something, you can use that module instead. And then there is the next thing. We're getting close to the end. So, but bear with me. Another really important thing about when you do server-side rendering is maintaining state. So it's like when you want the server to actually build the page, and then what it does is really it starts up Angular for you, and it takes all the HTML that it would take to show the page, and it gives you that instead, and then it starts Angular on top of that. So that's how the server-side rendering actually works, more or less. But what if we do something that's random, or something that won't be the same whenever the client starts up as when the server started? So we want a kind of a way to build a set of state when we're on the server, and then have that state kind of restart when the client gets here. So maybe we, like in our context, like we ask the server for the the page configuration, and says, so what's on / about us, and it will do an HTTP request and actually get the JSON file back. And when Angular would start up without the same state, it would just show the page, and then it would start asking the server for the same data and re-render everything with that. And that's just unnecessary, and it makes it slow, and it kind of feels weird and unnecessary to do that. Or maybe we were doing some animation stuff, or maybe some calculating a random map of something, and then it would be served, and then when Angular would bootstrap, it would redo the random stuff and draw something new, which is kind of not what we want to do. So we want to build some way to get the state that we just made on the server in the client as well. So I built a state transfer service. So the idea is it's a service, regular Angular service, that you can use. We can put stuff, whenever you put stuff in that service, that when you go to the client, you can ask for that stuff back, and it will be the same as the server just got for us. So it's pretty, the idea, or almost how it's implemented, is I kind of stole that from the Universal guys. And I know React and all of the other server-side guys, they're doing the same thing. But I just wanted to say, like, we handled this as well, and I wanted to show you some code as well. So it's just a regular service, as I said. So you can call, state transfer service .put and put stuff in it, and it's just a cache. And you can say .get, and you can get stuff back from it. So most of our other services, so the page resolver, it will probably go ahead and ask in the state transfer service and say, so is it here? And if it is, I'll just use that. And if it's not, then I'll go ask the server. And all the other services can do the same thing. So there's a little bit of magic here, because it's a little bit hard to know whenever Angular is actually done. So I just thought I'd put a little bit of code up here just to show you how it was implemented. So it turns out on our state transfer server module, so I built a server module and a client module for my same service. On the server module, we'll actually register a bootstrap listener. So whenever Angular is bootstrapping or is done bootstrapping on the server. And then I'll scroll up. Imagine me scrolling up. We'll actually get a reference to the app, and we'll say, so then there's an is stable observable that you can listen to, just regular subscribe. So we say whenever the app is stable, so that's when Angular is done with all their stuff, and it's gotten HTTP requests back, and it's done with its stuff. Then we can actually do some stuff. So that's when we then serialize the data that's in the state transfer service. And what we actually end up doing is just putting in on a window object with a large JSON blob of text in it, and then on the client, it's more or less it's a state transfer browser module, which more or less just reads from this object and puts it back in the service. So it's actually a pretty simple way to do this, and yeah, I just wanted to show you how you can do that as well. So Angular Universal is pretty good, but sometimes it's a little slow. And I don't know about you guys, but like we've been building on other platforms than Node for years. So we've been building on .NET or whatever other platform for years. And we're really comfortable with those, and we're comfortable with hosting these for production and stuff. But we're not really there. We don't really trust Node that much yet. Maybe we're just conservative, and maybe we just don't have the experience. But we want to kind of have an experience that where, if Node is not working or if it's really slow, like we want to be able to just cut it. And obviously, because it's Angular, so whatever Node is doing is just running the app on the server and then giving us HTML. So we can just, whenever Node is not answering, we can just serve the regular template with the app tag in it, and it'll just bootstrap on the client, and that's really easy. But one thing that we can't do that way is like if Node is always kind of slow, and it is for this, we want to be able to cache it. So we want to be able to give a really fast first response, so we can actually build up a cache of server-side rendered pages, and put that on the CDN, so it's really, really fast for our users, so they can actually get a really fast page load. So the problem is, though, drinking beer. So the problem is, what when we want to use personalized data? So if you're following along with any modern CMS these days, it's all about personalization. They want to say, so whenever you're this user, or whenever you're from Greece, or whenever it's 2 o'clock and it's after something, show this content instead of this, or whenever it's raining, or they want to do really clever stuff, and that's all good. But that kind of makes it really hard if we want to put it on a CDN or something, because then everybody just gets the same thing. That's kind of the idea. So I came up with 3 strategies for handling this. So how to handle personalization in a server-side rendered world that is cached. So one way to do it is to just do it at launch. So whenever our product page loads, we'll load from the CMS, we'll load from the CDN, so it's really fast, and then we'll just not put the page in the state transfer service. So whenever Angular wakes up, it'll ask the server for the real data, which will be the personalized data, and we'll just re-render the page. That's kind of a way to do it. It works, might work. We could do it at the next user interaction. So if it's a product list, maybe the user says, sort by something else, or only show me blue shirts or something. And then we can just, whenever there's a user interaction and we want to ask the server anyway, then we can, return personalized data, and that would work. Or maybe we can just don't. Maybe we can just say, so for this part of the application, so this part of the app tree, just don't server-side render this. So that might be the best way to handle it if it's, like a little login showing your name up in the top of the corner of the screen. So that's probably never going to work. Like you don't want that ever to be server-side rendered or cached, because nobody has the same name, and it doesn't really give that much value. So maybe we can just not server-side render that, and we don't want to show the wrong name. We don't want to show you're locked out and then lock people in back whenever they reload the page. So there's 3 different strategies, and they kind of, the idea of these strategies is you can kind of choose for this component you can use this strategy, for this component you can use this strategy, for this component you can use this strategy, because that's the right fit for this. So this is not one specific and you use this for everything on the page. So this is kind of a, whenever you're a developer, you kind of think, so for this component, what's the right way to handle it? But obviously, these 2 can be handled pretty easily. So just don't put it in the cache, or put it in the cache, and then this will work out of the box. But this, how do we do this in a world where we want to be able to server side to have an app that actually works and shows my name in the top of the screen when I'm logged in, but not have it be part of the server side. So I built a little directive that's called the NoSSR directive. So you just put this on a component or on anything, on a DOM element, anywhere in the app, and its implementation is so simple. I'll just show you. So it's more or less, it just says, so if I'm the server, clear the view container. So that's pretty much it. So it's pretty simple, and that will stop all of Angular from reading the rest of that page, the page app tree. So it's pretty simple. That's why I want to actually also show you the code. So that means we have server-side rendering work. It'll actually, spit out a huge bunch of HTML. But you see, this is actually the H1 that contains the welcome to this page. It has the hero image. It has all the spots with all the content in it. And you see up here, this is the state that's being transferred. So this is the initial state. The first page is this, and then there's, blah, 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 blah. So this is just, showing what Google is going to see whatever Facebook or whoever is going to see whenever they actually, go to your page without JavaScript turned on. So we made it. We got everything working, and in a little bit, maybe we'll take questions first, and then in a little bit, whenever we kill the live stream, I'll show you a demo, because I have a page that is the first one we built on the system, and we'll go live in 2 weeks, so I can't show it on the live stream, but I'll show you guys. So yeah, I guess that's it. You can find me again on Twitter. I'll tweet out the links. You can find. I put all of the code for the entire Angular application. It's all up on GitHub. You can just go ahead and find it if you want. You can start, make issues, use it however you want. If you make money with it, be happy. And I wanted to say, so last time I was in San Francisco with the Angular team, they gave me some of these very original Angular stickers. So if you want to, come take some of these. And I also got some of my business cards if you want to get in touch. But let's do questions if you want to. Yeah.
So it would be very clear to I do server-side rendering for every one of your components. In this case, when you change out, is every one of those components in server-side rendering?
No.
Just the initial.
Just the initial page. Yeah. So whenever the user goes to a page, that page is server-side rendered, and then the rest of it is just navigating around in a regular Angular app.
The first page could be a different page.
Yes.
Okay.
The first page could be any page. So you could land on any page from from Google or from Link or from anywhere. You can land anywhere, and they'll all be server-side rendered.
Yeah, I have one. With this CMS that's built, can you create templates as well, or just use ones that's already predefined and just fill the content for them?
Like all the page components, the front page component, they're all just regular Angular components. So you can put anything in them, and so you as an editor can just do that. And so for us, like we can use this with any CMS. I've been doing this approach for I think 2 or 3 CMSs, and so the only thing the CMS needs to be able to do is give you the JSON of whatever the page model is, and so then typically for the editor to have a good experience, then you probably want to build so there's a front page in the CMS, so the editor knows what fields are there and stuff. But you didn't really have to if you didn't want to. Does that answer your question?
Well, kind of. Actually, I was asking. So
I can show you some of the code if you want to. Maybe that will help.
Yeah, basically when you start, from what I understood, when you start your app, you can like go to the page you want and say like, okay, I want to use this template and fill it with this content that I've already created and do all of this in runtime.
Yes.
But can you create a new template in runtime and saying just add this to my list of available pages?
You could theoretically do that, but typically that would mean like in our world anyway. So for the context we build in, that means making a new deployment of the CMS and stuff, and that would probably invalidate the content cache anyway and the JavaScript bundle anyway. So I haven't built that, but you could theoretically add a component at runtime. Yeah.
Would you go about that?
How would I go about that?
Yeah.
You can probably so the router kind of is how you typically lazy load stuff, and that's kind of what you want it to do. So you want to lazy load and more stuff as you go. I'll think about it.
I think that's going to be a pretty common use case, or at least a lot of people are going to try to do that.
How?
Why? I look at Angular as a replacement for .NET or something like that. It's something that companies look at as a big framework that we can use and trust. Okay, so I'll take my example. We're trying to develop parts of a bigger app at various sites, not all of them in the same country. We would like them to dynamically be available for the end user. Let's say if you go to a shop, a web app shop, it's like I want to use this part, and this part, and this part, and then just magically will be available to you. The way I see it is kind of the content philosophy of Angular. You need to build the app with the contents. The app needs to know the contents. So you can't really separate them. You have to add some repository and you can pull from them and then build an app. That still has downtime. So the event in this use case would be to, I don't know, maybe have a net module that can at runtime add another component, another module, and have them render real time.
You can do that. So the big problem is really like how you want to do, like then when the new app wants to use some of the stuff that's loaded with the old app or vice versa. So that's kind of where it gets pretty hard. I actually have a friend who's working on a project where they're doing a product that's similar to how we do this, and then they want to have third-party developers doing it as they go along, and that's kind of what I hear you saying. So what like I'll give you his name. You can go talk to him. He likes to talk about it. But yeah, like he came up with a pretty clever solution where it is a little bit of a hack, but it uses a system like before Angular turned to Webpack, everything was built with System.js, and it's kind of using the system approach and then wrapping that in Webpack. So it is a little bit hacky, but yeah, I can't go very much into the detail of it. It's pretty complicated. But I'll give you his name, and you should definitely ask him. Cool. Oh yeah, you can close the streaming, and then I'll show you the demo. It's just like it's not a real big demo. It's just like a page that I actually built with this, and it's always